Hey, welcome to the Way of Valor. I am your host, Angie Taylor. And guys, this is going to be a transformative podcast for you today. I am excited to have Megan Babcock joining me. She is a functional nurse. She's a coaching nurse. She has her own business and so many things, Megan. And as we were just jumping into this conversation before we started the podcast, you talked about just the difference between prevention and true wellness and what's going on in the health industry. So I'd actually like to jump in the deep end quick with you as I welcome you to the Way of Valor. Just first, welcome to the show and thank you for spending your time with us. But let's talk about your journey along the way to where you are today.
So I've been a nurse for 21 years and I've had so many different roles within the healthcare industry, from being a nurse in the hospital and in critical care. I took care of patients who were having open heart. And then I went into medical device, and I've been into pharmaceuticals, and I've been into biotech. So I've kind of had my hands in so many different places. And about 5 years ago, I was I've always I wanted to be a healer and help people. And I thought, oh, that's being a nurse. And unfortunately, as I found for myself in medicine, it's really not set up or designed to get people well. You don't have the time. It takes a lot of work to change lifestyle and do modifications there. There are so many things that we can do naturally to support our bodies, but it's hard to find the information, or insurance doesn't cover those types of practitioners. And so I always engaged personally in acupuncture, chiropractic, herbs with Chinese medicine, and yet I still had this foot in the door. And so there was always this pull for me where it was just didn't feel fully aligned, and I was frustrated. And about 5 years ago, my husband got diagnosed with cancer and had to have a bone marrow transplant.
Wow.
And we were told there was no other option. And I know there's a lot of people who will go and do totally natural, and I love that. Because you know, if your mindset is there and you can do that, I think that the power of your mind is so important. Yeah. For my husband, he wasn't fully okay with going a natural holistic approach. But what was so amazing is that God provided a medical oncologist who had been a naturopath before, which is just crazy to me, because go from being a naturopath to poison. It's basically what chemo and radiation is, right? But she was so supportive of me in all of the things that I was bringing forth. And it really, we had a naturopath, we had her, she was able to tell us when to use certain things and when not to. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Complementary medicine at its best. He was using acupuncture for nausea, all of these things. And it felt so good and empowering, because we were able to be involved and take initiative in helping him be better. And for me, that was important, because I couldn't sit there and just do nothing. So as we went through that, he came out of the bone marrow transplant in October. You're homebound basically for 100 days. You can't be around anybody because you have no immune system. Luckily, being a nurse, I was able to do all of his IVs at home, and he never got readmitted to the hospital, which is an amazing thing. Then COVID hit. And that was a real panic, because we didn't know what we now have a better understanding of. And they were if he gets this, he could have all these side effects. And so we were really one of those people who were mask, do this, do that. But then I knew better, because these things they're not even the approaches that we take in the hospital when we're trying to, and so there was that moment of like panic and for a bit, but then as I started to like really think about what was being shared, I was like, this doesn't really make sense. And so I was kind of a little outspoken during that time. And I really got into a lot of the research and I wanted to understand and ask questions. But if you were asking questions, people didn't want to hear that.
Right.
And one of the things that I felt like was such a disappointment, and ultimately I ended up going and getting functional medicine certified, and all of those things kind of came out of this. It was, we knew that obesity and diabetes were the highest risk factors. And we also knew like vitamin D was very valuable and some of these things, and they were just getting dismissed. And I felt like, never let a crisis go to waste. And we did, because what we could have done is say, like, not only will you be safer from COVID, but you will also reduce your cardiovascular deaths, which, your cancer rates and all of these things if we start taking care of our bodies.
Yeah.
And that was a huge pivotal moment where I was like, I can't even have these conversations with people that I respected anymore. And so I had to go a different direction.
So, wow, that is quite a journey. I would love to hear what direction you ended up going, because obviously, as an outsider looking in, the medical communities, they set themselves up as experts. And so those of us without medical background are left in that what's true, what's not true. So what does somebody like you choose to go do with your gifts and your talents and your knowledge?
Yeah. So it is really hard, because if you start making these changes or you start asking questions, they're going to make you feel bad because they don't really have the answers. Medical doctors, when they go to school, most of them have like a class of nutrition, and so in my opinion, you want to have multiple opinions. Like having somebody from, a Chinese medicine standpoint and a naturopath, and it doesn't hurt to ask questions. So I'm a big ask questions. And if people aren't willing to answer your questions, then you probably want to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because they probably don't know the answer, but they're not willing to admit it, because that's kind of the problem with being the expert. The other thing I say is trust your intuition.
Yeah.
You are an expert of your body.
Good.
And when we tune in and we start getting curious and we start, I'm a big proponent of, even lab work can give you collect data. I don't say don't ever go to a doctor or don't collect data, but let's look at your weight. Let's look at your blood pressure. Let's look at your, where are your vitamin levels? No one ever checks those. They don't check those on a yearly basis. What's your vitamin D? When I got COVID, I got long COVID. And, one of the things, I had so much inflammation because I already have some autoimmune stuff that would be triggered in a normal situation. And then that really amps up your immune system. And I had more autoimmune things. I just had chronic fatigue and my memory and recall and all of these things were suffering. But then I also started to get numbness and tingling in my hands or feet. And I happened to be in my functional medicine course at the time. And I was like, okay, I want to have some lab work done, but I want to look at my vitamin D levels and my B12, because B12 can be a big neurological deficit if it's low.
Mm.
And so I went to my doctor. Luckily, he is like, okay, there's no harm in what you're asking for. Like, he gives it to me, you know? And so we looked at it, and my B12 was like barely registering. My vitamin D level
Wow.
was like at the very bottom of like the normal level. So doctors will look at me like, oh, well, you're normal. So I ended up getting, started taking, and I have some GI issues. So I wasn't absorbing my vitamins because I was actually taking them,
Mm.
but I wasn't absorbing
Mm-hmm.
them. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought I was doing something good. So then I moved to taking injections. And then I started using cryotherapy, and I started using a sauna, and I actually started to try to really reduce my sugar, which I went on a program, Optavia, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought like that looks like a really good product that reduces sugars. And we know that sugars really are problematic for inflammation, which
Mm-hmm.
is why with COVID, the inflammation is the problem. People weren't dying because their lungs were filling up with fluid. It was all this inflammation
Mm.
that they were having. And
Wow.
so when they started learning more about treating the inflammation and things like that, and we're learning still so much more,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
failed to ask good questions.
Right.
And if you don't ask a good question, you're not going to get a good answer.
Yeah. So true. So let's talk about your business. Like, you jump off the ledge, you
Mm-hmm.
walk away, you get your functional nursing. What did you end up going to do with yourself to earn an income, to become congruent with your belief
Mm-hmm.
system, as well as that innate desire for you to be a healer?
Yeah. So I think it's, just get started, right? That was the first thing, is like, I didn't know where I was going, but I felt called, okay, do the functional medicine. Then I realized, oh, there's a nurse coaching. So I stepped into that. I didn't even know there was such a thing within nursing. And
Mhm.
so then that opened my eyes to something totally different. And I was still working in my job. I was at a biotech company at that time, which I felt a little more aligned with, because it wasn't just a drug. It was like, we're using a diagnostic test to get more information. And that felt good to me. But then I was realizing that so much of our health is really based in what happened to us as a child.
Wow.
So,
Whoa, say that again.
so much of our health is really based in what happened to us as a child, whether
Mm.
you're coping with it from an anxiety, depression, like these, like struggling with that, or maybe, you struggle with eating. And it was as I was going through my coaching, and I had to coach so many people and do all these hours, that I started realizing, like, they would come to me for weight loss or to deal with their blood pressure. And then we would start doing all of this discovery work to kind of get to a root cause. Because that's what functional medicine is a root cause approach. Like,
Mhm.
we don't want to
Mhm.
just manage symptoms.
Yeah.
We want to get to the root, fix that, because all of the other things will resolve.
Yeah.
So I remember working with one client where it really just was like, so we were doing weight loss, but we started talking, and she started sharing with me about how her mother had put her on diets in 5th grade, like
Mm.
Jenny Craig.
Wow.
And the way her mom would talk to her and judge her, but food then became something she could actually control.
Mm.
Because even though her mom's putting her on diets, she could do whatever she wants because it's her body and no one can
Mhm. Mhm.
force you to do
Yeah.
those things, right? And so when we started doing the work on that, and she realized she was sabotaging herself, because what
Mm.
she really wanted was to be able to travel, have, you know, a long life. She has kids that were late teens, early 20s, being able to be a grandma, get on the floor with her baby. Like, when she started realizing, like, that way of life is not aligning with what I truly desire, which is what
Mm.
I was sharing in my shift.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that she needed to deal with that hurt from her mom.
Mm.
It was amazing then how she could start taking care of herself in a different way.
Mm.
And those other things begin to resolve. So then I realized, okay, I need to get certified in trauma stuff. I need to understand, I love Body Keeps the Score, which is all about how do we work with trauma, because counseling is
Mm-hmm.
not the best way. Talk therapy is not the best way.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that then transformed into something where, yes, I work with people's health. I work with, do you want to be a better entrepreneur? But it's really all about uncovering like what is holding you back, because you have a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
your dream, I believe, says a lot about like your calling and your purpose and who you
Mm-hmm.
were created to be, because you have this pull towards it, right? I had a
Yeah.
pull to be a healer.
Yeah.
I just wasn't fully aligned with it. So we had to
Mm-hmm.
figure out that. And then as you just start taking steps for further and further alignment, one thing leads to the next and you get a lot more clear. So now, I have a podcast where people come and share their story of overcoming and then how they're using it. I have coaches that can join my platform because they need help with the business side. So I coach them in the business, but they have the platform. They get to be a podcast host, and they don't have to go through all the steps to get there, because as someone who's
Mm-hmm.
built it, yeah, it's a lot of work, it's a
It
lot of
is a lot
money,
of work.
it's
Yep.
just and so they can come in and just plug into a platform. And I believe it's the power of our testimony that allows us to lead others out of their hard, right?
That's
And
good.
so when we have so many different stories and coaches with different stories, so when you read our bios, it's our story, it's our transformation, because one, we're vulnerable and we're sharing with you what's
Mm-hmm.
possible. So our stories are so powerful. And so when we have people with all different stories, they can kind of read through and see, wow, that really resonates with me. And when you already know someone's story, you don't feel so judged when you're
Right.
coming in to share yours, right? Think about it. I went to counseling for a lot of years, and I'm not knocking counseling. It just wasn't what I needed, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's, again, listening to your intuition. If something's not working for you, don't stick with it.
Right.
It's okay to say that didn't work. It wasn't a failure. That just wasn't working. Let's try something new. And because I was looking at the counselor as an expert, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I
Mm.
want to be different.
That's a great
But
point.
yeah, but what's best for you, Angie, or what's best for someone listening is not going to be what's best for me. So when I'm working with someone, it's not about trying to tell them the answers. It's about trying to get to what is it that's holding you back and what do you think is the right thing to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
teaching people to get curious and listen to their body and trust their intuition, because
Good.
as we grow up, we kind of stop doing that.
That's really good. And we do trust other people and fear other people's judgment. So you actually have a podcast called It's Your Story to Tell.
Mm-hmm.
We will definitely link it in our show notes, as well as your company now that is called It's Your Story to Tell, which I love. How can someone determine whether they're in that place of, because I think so many of us are just hustling and there's so much noise in our world, we don't even recognize we're living in
Mm-hmm.
this totally incongruent life. Our calling, who we were meant to be, is not in alignment with who we actually currently are. In fact, that's your journey is so similar to mine. I was in education for 30 years and was like, there's a problem here. How do we, like, if we're going to fix it, it's the same thing as you start getting business and money involved in practices, and they often get corrupted. And that's true of education as well as the health and wellness industry. And so
Mm-hmm.
I, would love for you to talk about how does somebody, one, discover that this is actually currently where you are, and
Mm-hmm.
what are the steps for them to move away from that?
Sure. So what you're talking about is self-awareness, right? And
Superpower.
that's something, unfortunately, it should be like a class that's taught from kindergarten or
Mm-hmm.
pre-K on up. And every year you just get an advancement so we can become more emotionally intelligent, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really lacking. I was lacking that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to learn the hard way. I came to a breaking point where I could no longer deny that this wasn't working, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was forced to look at it. I want people to not have to do that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again,
Mm-hmm.
you talked about, you know, where you are and what do you desire? Okay, so if you're sitting around and you're just dreaming of another life,
Mm-hmm.
probably that is a good sign that you're longing for something that's missing. Because I think our dreams and kind of the things that get us super excited or we motivate ourselves by say a lot about who we were created to be.
Yeah.
And so when you find yourself daydreaming or, oh my goodness, I'm so overwhelmed, I think overwhelm and anxiety is
Mm-hmm.
your body's way of saying, like, hey, there is not an alignment. If you are depressed, yes,
Mm-hmm.
there can be chemical imbalances, but a lot of the time it's just life imbalance
Mm-hmm.
that it's, we all want a quick fix. Like we
Yeah.
all want, like, can I take a pill and feel better? Like I
Mm-hmm.
understand that, but
Mm-hmm.
that pill will only last for so long and it's going to have side effects. So I like to help people start looking things a lot more holistically
Mm-hmm.
and incorporating mindfulness and,
Mm-hmm.
learning to just be calm, like, because you get anxious, your brain goes into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever is, your survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't actually think clearly.
Right.
So you're not in your conscious brain. And so you're spiraling. And when you act in that, you just keep repeating the pattern over and over again. I did it for a lot of years, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
an expert in that. And it wasn't until I could start learning some of these techniques that would allow me to calm my body and my mind and keep me in my conscious brain
Mm-hmm.
that I could make more clear assessments.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't know, if I had to summarize it, it's like if you are just feeling like you want more in life or you're feeling very anxious and not settled in your body, then that's probably a really good sign. And you need to start learning some skills to create calm, because life's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be hard. I'm an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. You're an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. Like, I'm taking on so many things. It's not that life got easier.
Right.
It's that I grew a capacity for being uncomfortable and not running from the uncomfortable, but using that to learn more about myself
That's good.
so that I could become the person that was capable of going after what it was I was desiring.
That's really good. So, how do they find you? Tell us how we can find you, how we can get your resources, get tuned into what you're doing, because I love that idea that we're acknowledging the the holistic approach to somebody's body. We're not denying that there are times where medical intervention is
Mm-hmm.
necessary and critical and life-saving, but the idea that there's so many things we can do to heal our own bodies. And so how do we
Yeah,
find
keep
you?
yourself from getting there, right?
There,
It's like
there. Yeah.
prevention. Ugh.
Yeah.
So it's yourstorytotell.com is my website. From there, you can get to everywhere. So that's just
Awesome.
a really great place to start. We do a blog post every Monday. We have a guided mindfulness that comes out every Monday. Every Friday, we have a new podcast story that's shared. Each of my coaches share their story on our page, our website, and they all have free downloads for, specific to those different areas: grief, domestic violence, toxic relationships, inner child healing. So there's lots of free resources so that you can get started. That was one of the goals I was sharing with you before we started. People who need these services are often in a place where it's really hard to have the time, resources, and all of that to be able to do it. And so we want to come alongside of people wherever they're at in their journey. And we really work hard to make that possible, because we believe that when you get better, you're going to be able to, we do pay it forward and all of these different other ways of giving back and contributing, because we know that when you are having success, everything in your life changes. You make more money, you're more fulfilled, you're a better parent. So really being able to focus on you, which is really hard in this world, because I know I thought that was selfish, but honestly, it was the best gift I gave myself, my children, my happy marriage, and now to the world and clients that I work with. So take time for yourself.
Which I love that. I love that. And we didn't we're out of time today, but we literally, you have to go check out Megan's story, because it is a story that will give you so much hope. If you're in the place right now where you feel like you're hidden and nobody knows, like you show up really well to the world, but nobody knows how dark it is in your house. That's in a lot of ways Megan's stories, and Megan, we'll have to have you back to share your story. But there is breakthrough available for you. There is hope available for you. And that's what we're talking about today. So Megan, thank you for joining us. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, share it out with your friends, give us a 5-star review. That helps us get the word out to invaluable resources. What Megan's doing is absolutely transformational for individuals as well as for whole families. So make sure you follow her on social media. Thanks for listening.